The story of empires is often a story of rise and fall, and one of the most fascinating of all is the Ottoman Empire, which for centuries ruled vast territories stretching across Europe, Asia, and Africa. The Ottoman state emerged in the late 13th century under the leadership of Osman and his successors, who built a formidable political and military machine. Over time, the Ottomans came to dominate the Balkans, the Middle East, North Africa, and large parts of Eastern Europe. For centuries, Constantinople, renamed Istanbul after its conquest in 1453, served as the beating heart of this empire and a symbol of its enduring power. Yet by the 19th century, the once mighty Ottomans faced enormous challenges. The empire was often called the sick man of Europe by rival powers who looked at its shrinking borders and internal turmoil as signs of inevitable collapse. Nationalist uprisings were spreading in the Balkans as different ethnic groups sought independence from Ottoman rule. European imperial powers such as Britain, France, Austria, and Russia increasingly meddled in Ottoman affairs, pursuing their own interests and sometimes openly supporting separatist movements. The Ottomans attempted a series of reforms to modernize their state and prevent decline. These were known as the Tanzimat reforms, and they began in the mid-19th century. The goal was to centralize administration, modernize the army, improve education, and create a sense of Ottoman identity that could transcend religious and ethnic divisions. Yet despite these efforts, the reforms faced resistance from conservative groups while also failing to fully satisfy nationalists who wanted complete independence. The empire was caught between tradition and modernity and unable to move decisively in either direction. By the end of the 19th century, the Ottoman sultans ruled with absolute authority, but dissatisfaction was growing among many segments of society. Intellectuals, students, and military officers increasingly called for constitutional government and an end to corruption. In 1876, Sultan Abdulhamid II briefly introduced a constitution and parliament, but within 2 years he suspended it and ruled autocratically for the next 3 decades. His reign saw censorship, oppression, and the use of a vast spy network to maintain control, but also modernization projects such as new railway schools and telegraph lines.
The turning point came in 1908 with the Young Turk Revolution.
The Young Turks were members of the Committee of Union and Progress, a political movement made up of reformist military officers and intellectuals. They demanded the restoration of the constitution and the re-establishment of parliament. When revolts broke out in Macedonia and other parts of the empire, Abdulhamid II was forced to give in. The constitution was restored and a new era of Ottoman politics began. The Young Turks hoped to transform the empire into a constitutional monarchy where power would be limited and representative institutions would play a role. At first, many groups welcomed the revolution. Different ethnic and religious communities believed it might bring greater equality and freedoms. Newspapers began publishing openly, political parties were formed, and debates about the future of the empire filled the streets of Istanbul and other cities. Yet the unity was short-lived. Nationalist aspirations clashed with the centralizing ambitions of the Young Turks. Armenians, Greeks, Arabs, and Albanians wanted greater autonomy or independence, while the Committee of Union and Progress pushed for a strong centralized state with Turkish dominance at its core. The internal turmoil was quickly followed by external threats. In 1911, Italy invaded Ottoman-controlled Libya, sparking the Italo-Turkish War. The Ottomans were unable to defend the territory effectively and ultimately lost Libya and the Dodecanese Islands. This defeat revealed the weakness of the Ottoman military and emboldened the Balkan states, which had long resented Ottoman rule. In 1912, the First Balkan War erupted. Serbia, Greece, Bulgaria, and Montenegro formed an alliance and attacked the Ottomans with the aim of driving them out of Europe. The war was devastating for the empire. Within months, it lost nearly all its remaining European territories, including much of Macedonia, Albania, and Thrace. The defeat shocked Ottoman society and exposed the fragility of the empire. A brief Second Balkan War followed in 1913, when the former allies fought among themselves over the division of spoils. The Ottomans managed to regain a small amount of territory around eastern Thrace and the city of Edirne, but the larger picture was clear. The Ottoman Empire was no longer a European power in any real sense. The Balkan defeats radicalized the Young Turk leadership. Figures such as Enver Pasha, Talat Pasha, and Cemal Pasha rose to prominence and pursued an increasingly authoritarian policy. They believed only a strong centralized state could preserve what remained of the empire. At the same time, they began to emphasize Turkish nationalism, more strongly alienating many of the non-Turkish populations of the empire. As the world moved toward global conflict in 1914, the Ottomans faced a crucial choice. Surrounded by powerful neighbors and weakened by internal divisions, they decided to ally with Germany and Austria-Hungary in the First World War. The decision was influenced by hopes of regaining lost territories and protecting the empire from Russian expansion. Once war began, the Ottoman armies fought on multiple fronts. They experienced some victories, such as the defense of Gallipoli against Allied invasion in 1915, which became a legendary event in Turkish memory. But overall, the war was disastrous. During the war, the Ottoman government carried out the deportations and massacres of Armenians, which have since been recognized by many historians as genocide. This dark chapter further undermined the empire's legitimacy and deepened divisions among its people. Meanwhile, British forces supported Arab revolts in the Middle East and gradually pushed the Ottomans out of territories such as Palestine, Mesopotamia, and Arabia. By 1918, the empire was collapsing. The war ended in defeat, and the Allies occupied parts of Anatolia itself. Istanbul was placed under Allied control, and the empire seemed on the verge of complete disintegration. Yet out of this disaster emerged a new leader, Mustafa Kemal, later known as Atatürk. A skilled military commander during the war, he organized resistance to foreign occupation and rallied nationalist forces in Anatolia. From 1919 to 1923, the Turkish War of Independence unfolded. Nationalist armies under Mustafa Kemal fought against Greek forces in western Anatolia, against French troops in the south, and against Armenian forces in the east. Through determined leadership and popular support, they gradually secured victory. In 1922, the last Ottoman Sultan Mehmed VI fled into exile. The following year, the Republic of Turkey was proclaimed with Mustafa Kemal as its first president. The abolition of the Sultanate marked the definitive end of the Ottoman Empire, which had lasted for more than 6 centuries. What followed was a sweeping program of reform under Atatürk. He introduced secularism, abolished the caliphate, modernized the legal system, adopted the Latin alphabet, and pushed for industrial and educational development. The transformation of the old empire into a modern nation-state was profound, and it shaped the course of 20th-century Middle Eastern and European history. Looking back, the story of the Ottoman Empire is one of both extraordinary achievements and tragic decline. It was an empire that connected continents, cultures, and religions for centuries. It fostered great architectural works, literature, and scientific learning. Yet it was also an empire that struggled with diversity, inequality, and the pressures of modern nationalism. Its final century was marked by desperate attempts to reform and survive, but ultimately the forces of nationalism, imperialism, and world war proved too strong. The legacy of the Ottomans, however, continues to be felt. In the Balkans, the Middle East, and North Africa, the borders, conflicts, and identities of today still bear traces of the Ottoman past. The fall of the empire and the birth of modern Turkey under Atatürk remain defining events in the history of the region and the world. The Ottoman experience reminds us of the fragility of even the greatest powers. Empires may rise through conquest and administration, but they fall when they cannot adapt to changing times or reconcile the competing identities within their domains. The story of the Ottomans is not simply about decline, it is about transformation. Out of the ruins of empire, a new nation emerged, and with it a new chapter of history began.